Okay, so in this week's guitar lesson, we're going to continue talking about the importance of phrasing and how to do that. And this is a continuation of what we did last week. So last week's lesson, which I'll put up on the screen right now, we talked about how important it is to pause when you're improvising a lead, and then also which notes you can pause on or which notes you can land on. And the whole point of that, and the point of this week's lesson, is to get you away from sounding like you're just playing up and down a scale. It's to give you some little phrases, some ideas, because basically when you're playing a lead like that, when you're improvising a lead, you're telling a story. You're not using your voice, you're using your fingers, but it's the same thing. You've got words, you've got sentences, and you have to stop and have dramatic pauses and all of those things. It's okay to repeat yourself like you do when you're telling a story. You can repeat phrases. So we're going to touch on some of the things we didn't talk about last week in this week's lesson. So in this video, we're going to go through the first half of that lead. If you'd like to learn the second half of the lead, download the MP3 jam track and also the tablature for everything so that you can practice it all. You can get those extras by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP528. All right, so let's talk about this song. Now, this song is in the key of E, and there are two main chords that you'll hear, at least in this first half of the solo. It goes between the E and the C sharp minor. It goes back and forth between those two chords. Now, there is a chord in between those. I play the B chord in between. So I played it like this. Here's your E. So there's the B, and then to your C sharp minor. Then we go back to the B, and then back to the E, and I just keep that pattern going. Now, what are these three chords? How are they connected? Somebody's going to be thinking that or asking that. Your E chord, your B chord, your C sharp minor chord are all in the same chord family. They're all in the key of E. And that's what we're going to be thinking about as we play this lead. In fact, everything we're going to be playing is really just pentatonic scale stuff. There's nothing complicated. And so we're thinking about the key of the song, which is the key of E. And I'll put a lesson up on the screen for those of you that want to know more about chords and chord families and which chords go together. Circle of fifths lesson that I did a while ago. So what is the connection then between that E chord and that C sharp minor? That's also talked about in the circle of fifths lesson that I just mentioned. But basically, every major chord has a relative minor chord, and every minor chord has a relative major chord. So C or E and C sharp minor are connected. C sharp minor is the relative minor of E. It's also your sixth chord. So you can just remember your sixth chord is the relative minor chord for those of you that follow the number thing. So why am I even mentioning that? Well, it's important to know that because your major chord and its relative minor chord share the same scale. They both are the same notes as your E major scale. So my E chord and the E major scale, that makes sense that those two would fit together. But my C sharp minor chord, if I play the same notes as my E major scale, but I focus more on the C sharp note in that scale, I will be playing the C sharp natural minor scale, or Aeolian mode. So, same notes. The same then is true of your pentatonics. So my E major pentatonic scale, those notes, those 5 notes of my E major pentatonic scale are the exact same notes as my C sharp minor pentatonic scale. You can hear that they sound different depending on the chord underneath them. Remember, it's always the chord underneath the scale that defines where you're at in space. So if I play the C sharp minor chord, I've got the minor pentatonic bluesy thing versus my E major chord. I've got a totally different sound. All right, so the area of the fretboard that we're going to be focusing on as we play this lead, just to limit our possibilities, we're not thinking all over the fretboard, we just need a few notes to grab onto to be able to do this, is we're going to be playing out a pattern 4 of your E major pentatonic scale. So we're going to be right there using those notes. Now, it just so happens that that's also pattern 4 of your C sharp minor pentatonic scale. You might want to come down to that note just to wrap it up there. But it's the same notes, right? And so we're not even going to be really playing all 6 strings. We're really only going to be on the top 3 strings for most of this lead. So that's pretty much where we're going to be playing all of our lead from. So now what I want to do is I'm going to put on the jam track, and I'm going to talk us through this lead, and we're going to start with one note and we're going to build from there. Okay, so I have the jam track that's playing now. It's going to loop over the first half of the jam track, the E chord and the C sharp minor chord, just those 2 chords. And remember, we're going to be playing out of this position, your pentatonic scale, pattern 4. So major pentatonic scale for E, minor pentatonic scale for C sharp. But it's the same notes, whether it's the E or the C sharp minor. Now the first thing I want to do is play this 5th fret 2nd string, this E note. Just watch this first, and then I want you to try it with the jam track. But we're going to play that note. That's an E note, so that's going to work great, obviously, over your E chord. It's the root of that chord. But over your C sharp minor, there's that note. It's your minor 3rd. So check this out. We're just going to hit the one note over each chord. And I'm doing this just to get a little cadence going, and also to hear that interval, hear how that note reacts to the major chord and how it reacts to the minor chord. Now I'm going to add to that, I'm going to add the 7th fret 2nd string like this. For each of those chords. Notice it works in both situations. Okay, I'm going to also add the 6th fret 3rd string. We'll just alternate it now. Just back and forth. Okay, the other thing I'm going to add is a little bend here on the 7th fret 2nd string like this. However I want to bend it. I've got just those few notes that we talked about, but I can play an entire lead using that and expressing myself the way a singer would. And sometimes we focus on the wrong things. We try and play up and down scales, but what if you just limited yourself and you really worked on your vibrato and the way that you bend and just expressing yourself with your fingers and your timing? Now, it doesn't matter when I come in. It's going to work over either of those chords. Now, I could obviously move into other patterns, but for now, the purpose of this is just to show you that with a few notes, you can start to make music. All right, so now that you have that background information, let me play for you the solo that I played at the beginning of this video. I'll put the tab up on the screen at the same time. I'm not going to call it out note for note. I don't really need to. I really just explained where all those notes come from and the thought process behind it. So I want to do that just for this first part of this, and then when we get into the second part of the solo, I will call it out and explain where those notes come from. Okay, so you'll notice that the solo went on and I played. And all I'm doing for that is I moved out of pattern 4 and up into pattern 5. Now, pattern 5, I love the top part of this on strings 1 and 2 because it's a little box and it's super easy to visualize. So I would be between the 9th fret and the 7th fret on the first string and on the second string. So 9, 7, 9, 7. So the way that I started that goes, and you can see it's between that 9th fret 2nd string and the 7th fret 1st string, but you can see where it's coming from. then I went a little hammer-on between the 7th fret and the 9th fret on the first string. And then I dropped back into pattern 4 and went. So back into that bend on that 7th fret 2nd string. So you can see it's all stuff you already have learned. We've already talked about anyway. And there's really nothing complex here. But it's taking your time and stopping and thinking almost like a call and response. To me, a lot of this, I probably should have started this video with that, but a lot of this is like, there's a call and a response to that might be, right? It's just the way that, you would sort of sing it. So, all right, so for this next note, what I did there was I was still in that little box there, that pattern 5 of it would be my major pentatonic scale because we're over the E chord. But when I did a bend here on this 9th fret 1st string, I did a half bend. I bent to this note, which would be the flat 7, right? And your E7 chord. So if I'd done a full bend, it would have sounded very happy and major, but I did a half bend there, which gave it more of a bluesy, it pushed me into the E minor pentatonic scale just for that one note. And I didn't think about it when I did it. I knew the position, that pattern 5 position, but I was hearing something a little more bluesy there. And so my fingers and this is, once you get the intervals sort of under your fingers, I mean, literally, you'll be able to do that. And it comes from just hearing it, though. I could hear that before I played it. Right? Just wanting to get into that flat 7 sound. It wasn't until after the fact that I realized what that note was. All right, so for this next lick, I did the B.B. King thing. I came up to my 12th fret 1st string and slid it down. That's my E note. So that's going to work. That B.B. does that all the time. So whatever key he's in, he will just find the highest, note of the key that he's in. So in this case, my E note was up here. It was easy to find, very accessible. You just hit the one note. It's so B.B. King. But that's what I did. And then I slid back into pattern 4 where we started. And did the bend on that 7th fret string. So that's the B.B. King thing.